Margaret Winifred Drysdale was the cleverest and most attractive of the 4 children born to Thomas Drysdale and his wife, Marion. Madge, as she came to be known, was born in Scotland in 1871 and immigrated to the United States with her family when she was about 7 years old, after her father took a position with Jaffe and Pincus, linen importers. In the 1887 to 1888 season, while still in her teens, she got a job working in the chorus of a musical production at the Casino Theater in New York City as a member of their opera company, and adopted the stage name Madge Yorke. After that, she hit the road, appearing in productions of The Parlor Match, A Trip to Chinatown, Natural Gas, and Hoss and Hoss. She was in the latter company during the 1892 to 93 season, and it was in that production that she met a fellow performer named James B. Gentry. Gentry was at least a dozen years older than Yorke, and was not deemed a great catch in the physical features department. Hailing from Richmond, Virginia, he was described as sallow and stoop-shouldered, with a scar under his left eye, and he talked with a strong nasal twang. Despite his shortcomings in the looks department, he was considered polite and honorable, and he soon befriended Miss Yorke, a friendship which blossomed into a romance. When Yorke left the stage for a time at the end of the 1893 to 94 season, Gentry continued to call on her, and as she still lived with her parents, he soon found himself in their good graces as well. By the end of the year, they had become engaged. However, when Madge decided to return to the stage as 1894 drew to a close, things between her and Gentry soured. During the first week of January 1895, she got a small part in the theatrical company of The Baggage Check. Hoping to be with her, Gentry approached the company's producer, W.F. Crossley, and asked him for a part in the production. Crossley acquiesced, but things didn't work out, and he dismissed Gentry after the first week. Yorke, faithful to her beau, submitted her resignation. Crossley, not wanting to lose the young actress from his roster, agreed to give Gentry another chance. Unfortunately, problems persisted, and he was dismissed after another week. The problems purportedly centered around Gentry's erratic behavior. When sober, he was agreeable and well-liked, but when intoxicated, he was prone to moody disgust and despondency. And Gentry was spending a great deal of his time with the liquor bottle. His excessive drinking often resulted in outbursts against his fiancée, and they often quarreled. He would soon become repentant, and she always forgave him. Gentry landed a role with William Collier Company in a production called Back Number, and since both he and Madge deemed it best to remain with their respective employers instead of having one of them trailing after the other and sacrificing an income, they agreed to write each other on a daily basis. Gentry's depression soon worsened, and his fellow actors described him as being in a state of drunken gloom a good part of the time. Crossley claimed the couple had a bitter quarrel, and they were on the outs. One report was that some of his fellow actors decided to play a joke on Gentry by telling him that Yorke had taken up with another man. For an already unstable fellow, this information, or misinformation, soon tipped the scales in a dangerous fashion. His professional cohorts wrote his drunken ramblings of revenge off as a case of love madness, and his glowerings and warnings of a revolver were taken calmly. Although there was no hard evidence that Yorke and Gentry had parted ways, rumors circulated that Edward McGee, who appeared as the juvenile lead in The Baggage Check alongside Yorke, claimed that she had dumped Gentry on the recommendation of her parents and at the time of her death was romantically involved with her co-star, McGee. Whether the rumors were true or not, Gentry was apparently believing them. On Sunday afternoon, February 17th, Crossley saw Gentry walking down Broadway with Joe Coyne, a fellow comedic actor. Gentry had taken the midnight train from Boston, apparently to meet up with Yorke, but she had failed to show. Gentry, who was obviously intoxicated, immediately brought her up as a topic of conversation, stating, "My God, how I love that girl." In fact, his love for her was so great that he boarded a train to see her in Philadelphia, where she was staying at the Zeiss Hotel, having checked in early that morning with several other members of the Baggage Check cast, following a stint in Chester, Pennsylvania. The play was scheduled to open at the Empire Theater on Monday night. Reportedly, Yorke took a 9:50 a.m. train to New York City that Sunday, but returned to Philadelphia by 6 p.m. Exactly who she went to visit wasn't clear, but it obviously wasn't Gentry. 3 hours later, Gentry arrived at the Zeiss Hotel and asked to see Yorke. Since the hotel personnel didn't know who he was, they asked him to wait while they contacted her. Instead of waiting, Gentry took the stairs to the 3rd floor. The first door he knocked on happened to be the room of Nellie Buckley, also an actress in the play, who claimed that Gentry looked very badly. She directed him to the right room, and he entered it unannounced. Yorke was with Lita Clark, a fellow cast member, practicing songs when her beau arrived. Although surprised by his presence, Yorke wasn't alarmed, and she introduced Gentry to Clark and vice versa. According to Clark, Gentry immediately and angrily asked Yorke, "Why did you not meet me today?" Before a reason could pass through her lips, Gentry produced the revolver he had so often mentioned to his cohorts in the previous weeks, took aim, and fired 3 shots, each of which made contact with Yorke's head. One over the right eye, one in the center of the forehead, and the third close to the left temple. Gentry bolted, apparently making his retreat via the back fire escape, and slipping into one of the numerous little alleys in the rear. His victim was immediately transported to the Pennsylvania hospital, 2 blocks from the hotel, but she was pronounced dead upon arrival. Charles T. Blaney, who wrote the baggage check, had been so impressed with Yorke's abilities in the supporting role of the Italian maid, he was writing a play called Chattel Mortgage, which would have placed Yorke in a leading role. The play had already been set to be produced in New York the following month. Though Yorke's star was obviously on the rise, the same could not be said for Gentry's. Shortly following Yorke's murder, Gentry's acting cronies relayed a comment he had made just before he boarded the train in Boston. "I'll meet her tomorrow, boys, and I'll get the whole truth out of her. And boys, if you never see me alive again, you'll know it's another case of a perfidious woman." He spoke that last line while patting the revolver in his pocket. While making his getaway, Gentry had fractured 2 ribs when he jumped from the fire escape. Then, while wandering through the snow in Fairmount Park, he attempted suicide. Though no method of this action was reported, the incident had added to his illness, and the inquest into Madge Yorke's death was delayed until April 12th, when Gentry had recovered enough to be present. Upon his counsel's advice, Gentry made no statement. After the hearing, the cause of death was revealed. The jury found that Margaret W. Drysdale came to her end by gunshot wounds received at the hands of James B. Gentry. Regarding the romance between McGee and Yorke, McGee claimed he had met Yorke near the end of January when they were introduced to each other by Gentry, whom McGee had known for about 10 years. Gentry introduced Madge as his betrothed, and according to McGee, he respected those boundaries. Any rumors circulated about an affair between McGee and Yorke were the product of Gentry's alleged friends, making fun of Gentry for being so foolhardy as to believe nothing was going on between Yorke and McGee, eventually working him into a frenzy. The trial finally got underway in June 1896. 2 railroad workers, a conductor and a ticket taker, provided testimony that placed Madge Yorke in Jersey City, New Jersey, where she was supposed to meet with Gentry. So she had actually been there, despite Gentry's claim to the latter. Apparently, they had just failed to cross paths due to a misunderstanding, which proved to be the final straw for the actor. He then went to New York, where he met up with some of his friends, who jokingly mentioned that Yorke was fooling around. Unfortunately, Gentry was suffering from a severe bout of influenza, in addition to drinking too much, and he took the joke seriously. According to the testimony of 2 of Gentry's acquaintances, he was in a dazed condition, drinking way too heavily, and not paying proper attention to his appearance or hygiene during the week before the fatal encounter with his fiance. In addition, he complained of headaches, had no appetite, often missed his lines, and was melancholy, forgetful, and despondent. Gentry himself maintained that he had no recollection of the event, and that he was in such a dilapidated state he didn't remember anything until he woke up in a Philadelphia hospital. The defense rested on the evening of June 26, 1896, and the jury retired at 9:30 without having reached a verdict. They reconvened the following morning and reached a verdict by the end of the day. James Gentry was found guilty of murder in the first degree for the killing of Margaret Drysdale, a.k.a. Madge Yorke. Gentry was sentenced to hang, and the date was set for April 22, 1897. The day before the sentence was to be carried out, the Board of Pardons recommended that Gentry's sentence be commuted to life imprisonment, which he was to serve at Philly's Moyamensing prison. One friend that stood by Gentry during his years in prison was fellow entertainer George M. Cohen, who hired an attorney to help get Gentry out of jail. In June 1909, after having spent 14 years behind bars, Gentry's counsel submitted a petition for his release that contained the signatures of many prominent businessmen and practically the entire membership of the Pennsylvania State Senate and the House of Representatives. Gentry was a free man by the end of the month. Cohen, who was doing very well at that point in time, offered Gentry a leading role in a production of his called The Yankee Prince. Unfortunately, the fact that he had been kept from his craft for so long resulted in him feeling ill-prepared for the undertaking. Following the first rehearsal, one of Gentry's friends found him sitting alone, his head in his hands. "What's the matter, Jim?" "Good God," Gentry replied, "no one knows me. It has been a longer time than I thought. I feel like a beginner." He asked to trade his role in for a smaller one, and his wish was granted. When Cohen offered him another part in another play, he turned it down, only saying, "I can't learn it." He briefly toyed with the idea of going into vaudeville, but that plan soon fell through. His increasingly queer actions eventually resulted in several of his friends, Cohen among them, placing him in the Long Island Home, a sanitarium, in late August 1910. Upon his release, he moved into a hotel room on New York's 42nd Street. He died there on July 25, 1912, at the age of 55, from heart disease. Cohen, a friend to the end, covered Gentry's funeral expenses. And so ended the sad tale of Madge Yorke and her killer.